Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wendy Cromash, and thank you for joining us for today's Levy lecture. We have Fred Guttenberg, who will be discussing with us his book, Find the Helpers. And let me just go through one or two announcements, and then we will speak to Fred directly. He's going to read from his book. Okay, hang on one second. First, we would like to thank the Levy Senior Center Foundation. Without the foundation, none of this would be possible. So thank you very, very much. We also want to thank our corporate sponsor, Avidor Evanston. Less than a year old, Avidor Evanston is now open on Oak Street, just north of Church in downtown Evanston. It's a beautiful facility. I've taken the tour myself, and I promise you it's lovely. If you're looking for maintenance-free living with upscale amenities for adults 55 plus, you have to go for a visit. It's a great option for people who want to downsize without the commitment of buying. Rentals start at only $18.85 a month, and they also have apartments available through the Community Partners for Affordable Housing. Ask Maddie for more information. They offer regularly scheduled cocktail parties, happy hours, concierge on site 7 days a week, outdoor entertaining spaces, fitness and wellness programs all year round, resident interest groups, and I'm told that they have a movie room or a theater screening room where they're actually watching the Levy lecture right now. Avidor Evanston observes pandemic protection protocols, making it easy and safe for you to tour the building. Make an appointment today and take advantage of special opening pricing and flexible lease timing. They will do everything they can to make your move smooth and carefree. Their number, hang on one second. Their website is avidorevanston.com. That's the URL, avidorevanston.com. And their number is 847-802-8700. Again, 847-802-8700. Thank you, Avidor Evanston. Okay. Fred Guttenberg has been in the media a lot these past 3 years. And when I asked Fred if he would agree to speak to our group, he readily agreed, and we discussed it in the format that is most comfortable for him, where he's had the most positive results, is a conversation. So I've taken the questions that you've submitted in advance. I've added some of my own. Fred and I have discussed which parts of the book he'd like to read, and we're going to do that. But I'm just letting you know this will be a conversation between the two of us. Fred has been in the news because his daughter was murdered 3 years ago. And as a result of that incident, he has been an active voice for improving gun safety legislation. He's interacted vocally with many politicians. He has a very active Twitter feed. If you're on Twitter, I recommend it highly. And I recommend following Fred highly. But in addition to the loss of his daughter, Jaime, his brother was an emergency room expert, or he was an expert in emergency medicine, a physician, and was highly regarded throughout New York State. He approached, when he saw what was taking place on September 11th, he went over with his team. The building collapsed around them. They were able to escape, and he and his team set up a triage center and were treating what victims they could find for 16 days on site at 9/11. And as a result of that, 16 years later, he was diagnosed actually, years later, he came down with pancreatic cancer. It took, he was able to live for a few more years, but eventually it did kill him. And that took place 4 months before the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Parkland shooting. So as a result of those two American tragedies, Fred has, in looking back on his life, has been greatly helped by people who have extended themselves and have helped him. And he's been able to capture this optimism, and he's put it in a book, Find the Helpers, named for the phrase that Mr. Rogers would say to his audience, when he was talking to children about when you're scared, find the helpers, look for the helpers. So Fred is going to talk about his perseverance and optimism and the journey that he's been on the last 3 years. So without any further ado, I will introduce you to Fred Guttenberg, and Fred will read us a section from his book.
Thank you for that amazing introduction. Nice to be with everybody today. And, I want to take a minute just to introduce myself and to read from the book. But for those who don't know me, or for those who do know me, my name is probably most familiar because of what happened on February 14th, 2018 with my daughter when she was murdered in Parkland. But the other part of my story, as Wendy spoke about, is 4 months prior, my brother died of cancer related to his service in 9/11. So I am somebody who, in a 4-month period, lost two people he loves to truly national American tragedies. And following that, went through what people go through when they're trying to get through grief. And I'll never forget when I was planning Jaime's funeral, the funeral director came to me and handed me a journal. And he said, "Have you ever journaled before?" And I said, "I haven't." He goes, "I want you to take this as a gift, and I want you to start." Now, I am not somebody who was a prolific writer before all of this happened. But what happened to me after Jaime was killed is I got very active at first on Facebook, just constantly writing my feelings. And then I was encouraged by my older sister to join Twitter. I wasn't on Twitter at the time, and to use that platform as well. And I started writing. But at the same time, in a more long form way, I was journaling in the journal that the funeral director gave me. A few months later, in April of 2018, I told my wife I wanted to write a book. And I wanted to write a book that was about our family story of being part of these two tragedies and how the country responded differently. That was my original intention for the book. But in the process of writing, it became clear to me that my story was actually a lot different than I had previously even thought, because it wasn't possible without all of the amazing people who were part of my life, who carried me, who brought me forward. And that's how the book ultimately evolved into telling that story of all of these amazing people, and ultimately evolved into Find the Helpers. With that, I want to read you a little bit from the book so you know what the book is and what it isn't. And the first paragraph I'm going to read is this. This book is not about gun safety or what happened in Parkland. Instead, I share the story of my journey I've been on since Jaime's death and how I've been able to get through the worst of times thanks to the love and kindness of others. I tell the story of my family life, my brother Michael's illness and untimely death, and the story of what happened to my family and our community. Despite these very hard subjects, this book looks forward. You need to know, despite how hard this has been, I've got this and you've got this. The other paragraph I'd like to read, which I really do think sets things up nicely, is this. When I set out to write this book, my original intention was simply to tell my story. However, as I began writing, it became clear to me that telling my story is not possible without all of the amazing and inspiring people who have been a part of it. My story would not have been possible without all the helpers who were a part of my life before Jaime was murdered and those who became a part of my life after. What I have learned is that it is the helpers who have carried me. It is the helpers who helped me to move forward. It is the helpers who gave me the inspiration and who lifted me when I was weak. It is the helpers who encouraged me through negativity that accompanied my mission. We all suffer amazing highs and lows in life. My ultimate advice to anyone is that whatever you are going through, always seek, let me turn the page here, always seek out your helpers. They are there and they will carry you when you need it. As I write this final chapter, this country is in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. As you read this, I truly hope that this idea of relying on helpers is something that you find useful. Helpers may be family, they may be people in media that you come to rely upon, they may be politicians that you rely upon for information. They may be friends who simply organize online video sessions like this so that you can all stay connected. We all have our helpers, and learning to embrace them is a way through both our moments in life and also our hardest and darkest moments in life. With that, thank you for having me, and I look forward to having this conversation.
Well, I'm just amazed at your optimism. Okay, so here's the first question. After reading your book, what has impressed me the most is your ability to take two horrific tragedies and use them as sources of hope, inspiration, and motivation. When the topic is guns, you've helped shift the discussion away from the Second Amendment and more towards background checks, the sale of ammunition, gun safety, waiting periods, age requirements.
Mhm.
Your ubiquitous presence in Congress and in all forms of social media has galvanized legions of Americans during a time of immense political polarization. You've been relentless, laser focused, and respectful amid a political environment that specialized in nastiness and lies. And you've helped spread the word that we, the people, have the power to be the answer, to be the solution, to be the helpers. Yet you are also motivated by guilt because you never bothered to be involved with gun safety issues until it was your kid.
Right.
What, in your view, is it about this time, about Parkland, about your message that is helping gain traction against the NRA and the gun lobby that was not as effective in earlier shootings, such as Newtown, Las Vegas, the Pulse nightclub, and we could go on. There's a huge
Yeah.
list. Why now? I mean, if Newtown didn't do it, why now?
You know, Newtown, those were young kids who couldn't find a voice afterwards. Um, they didn't, because they were young kids, they didn't have cell phones to record what was happening as it was happening. And, you know, I will tell you, cell phones played a huge role in changing this dynamic because that shooting got recorded and you couldn't escape the violence. It was there. And, you know, we all saw how these kids who I was one of the people who thought our children didn't know how to communicate, but we were wrong. Not only do they know how to communicate, and not only are they fierce in what they want, this cell phone actually became their weapon because they used it to strategize, organize, and coordinate. The day after the shooting, I attended this vigil in Parkland, Florida. And my intention was just to go there, just to be with my community. And when I got there, the mayor asked me to speak. And I stood on that stage and I spoke. I'll never forget saying that night, this time, gun violence came to the wrong community and messed with the wrong dad. Because speaking for myself, I am relentless. I am someone who won't stop. And what I've become associated with is a bunch of other parents who are also relentless, who won't stop. Um, our safety is worth fighting for. Our safety is worth fighting back. The gun lobby in the past was used to kind of having an open forum. They were used to controlling the conversation, and they weren't used to people like me who said, not on my time, not on my watch. Um, and we're going to defeat them.
It's interesting that you bring up, about the Newtown kids not having cell phones and being
They were
small.
young. Yeah.
Right. Which I would have thought would have been the reason that the country would have been united in supporting the legislation, but that didn't happen. But the Parkland kids, I heard David Hogg speak a
Yeah.
few years ago. He came to a local synagogue here in Evanston. Emma has been incredibly articulate. Those are
Yeah.
only two. I'm sure there are many others. So you're right about the kids having a voice.
We listen, when you look at Sandy Hook, there have been some amazing efforts that have come out of Sandy Hook. It really did start the change of the conversation, because you look at some of the groups that are still very active now, of parents. It was the start of the true gun safety movement that we see today, but it didn't have the ability to yet take on the pushback from the gun lobby. After Parkland, that's what we did. We went after that lobby and decided that we were taking it on. Um, you know, you've read the book, and I'm very open in the book about the fact that after returning home from the vigil that night, I walked to my house and I said, I'm going to break that effing gun lobby. That's been my mission. And we are. They are now toxic. They didn't used to be. And so because we were able to do that, we've now put this country in a place where the past two election cycles in 18 and 20, Americans, when they voted, this was a key issue that they voted on, and they voted for gun safety. It has changed everything about the politics, and it does give me hope.
When you say gun safety, are you talking about the restrictions on ammunition sales, or
Well,
or
listen, it's all of that. So here's how I look at it. Um, we have an issue in this country right now where there's over 400 million weapons on the streets, and many of them in the hands of people who intend harm. Either they steal them, or they're left unlocked, or they're traded illegally. And the problem with that is we have a gun violence death rate that keeps going up. We have a issue where the instances of gun violence keep going up, and the severity of the injuries keep getting worse because of the danger of the weapons on the streets. So when I talk of gun safety, I have three things in mind. How do we lower the gun violence death rate? How do we decrease the instances of gun violence? And how do we decrease the severity of injuries when they happen? And so that includes dealing with background checks, not just on firearms, but on ammunition as well. It includes talking about age of ownership. It includes talking about what they call red flag laws, or depending on the state, extreme risk protection orders. Um, it includes discussions on should things be banned, and if so, what. It includes what should be done to treat this more as a public health issue, so that physicians are able to freely discuss weapons with families. Do you have a weapon in your home? Is it locked up? And if not, do you understand the risk? There are so many things we can do to save lives that do not interfere with anybody's rights, and we need to get in the mindset of doing it.
I've heard, I remember reading someplace that I think NIH is not able to do any research on gun safety. Something was passed that was not allowed. Are you working to getting that undone?
It's happening. So they weren't able to, and there was no funding going towards it. Um, I think it was in 2019, maybe it was early 20, Congress finally gave them the ability to do that research and put some funding behind it. It wasn't a lot, but it was a start. And so they are finally able to look at this as a public health issue and research and provide possible recommendations, but it's very limited. That is going to change in this administration. I fully expect the ability to look at gun violence as a public health issue and bring in the public health agencies to address it is going to accelerate.
Great. Your book discusses the evolution of your involvement with three important social causes. Orange Ribbons for Jaime, created to honor the memory of your daughter by raising money for the things that she cared about, namely animals, handicapped children. She wanted to be an occupational therapist like your wife, a pediatric occupational therapist, and dance. And you've supported qualified students for 3 different types of scholarships.
Correct.
There's gun safety legislation to prevent tragedies from Parkland that you just discussed, and the role of first responders who perished in 9/11 to honor the memory of your brother and others who perished. How were you able to juggle all of these causes physically, emotionally, financially, and spiritually? It's a lot.
Um, so it's a great question, and as long as I keep myself busy doing it, I guess I have the good fortune of not spending too much time thinking about the how and getting too burnt out. But here's the answer. I mean, listen. Prior to all of this happening with my brother and my daughter, I was a business owner. I had 19 Dunkin' Donuts locations. I learned how to do a lot and multitask in a very chaotic environment. It's not like this because this brings in a very emotional reality to it. Um, I do it with my helpers. I mean, that's the truth. There are days where to do all of it feels like a struggle, and I know who I can reach out to kind of set me straight. Um, there are days where I'm exhausted and I know I need a break, and I know who is there for me to help me through those days. But for the most part, the way I do it um, is by remembering Jaime, by keeping Jaime and Michael on my shoulders every second of every day. As a parent, we always react to what happens to our kids. And my brother and my daughter were the 2 strongest people I've ever met. No matter how hard this gets, no matter how stressful this gets, it'll never be as bad as what my brother went through when he was trapped in the World Trade Center, or what my daughter went through while she was running down a hallway for her life. And because I know it'll never be as bad as what they experienced, I can keep pushing myself forward. Listen, my goal is to keep pushing myself forward to a place where I know the goal's been achieved and I can retire and walk away and never be heard from again. And I'd like that to happen this year. This is the year where this legislation needs to happen. So that's my goal. But I'll keep fighting until we get it done.
Okay. I thought it was it was a good strategic move. When you meet with the legislators, you do not sit down.
Nope.
They offer you a chair, they want you to get comfortable, and you will not sit. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that actually started a week after Jaime was killed at the CNN town hall, where people who were watching saw me confront Senator Rubio. And the entire audience in this big, huge hockey arena was all sitting. And I was in a really, just still a very emotional, amped up place. I couldn't sit. I stood there the whole night. And I remember the next day seeing a photo in the press of me standing over everyone else sitting. And it just registered with me. And I thought that day, I said, the problem with the gun safety movement in the past is it's always been way too polite and way too temporary. And I decided I just didn't have a need to be polite. I wanted to be polite. I didn't have a need to make people feel comfortable talking about what happened about my daughter, and I wasn't going to be temporary. So on that very first visit to Washington, D.C., in the early part of March, after this all happened, every office I went to, I continued standing. Now, for those of you who have not been to DC to lobby, the way all these offices are set up is typically with a very comfortable couch and comfortable chairs. And you sit down with your legislator and everybody gets really comfortable and, you do nice things and say nice things and
There's
you move
probably
on.
food.
Well, not food, but but it's intentional that everybody should just be comfortable and move on. And I didn't want to make the legislators feel comfortable. So I stood. And when they would ask me to sit, I explained to them that I intend to stand. You're free to sit, or you can stand with me. Um, and it just became something that I've done ever since. And to this day, I continue to stand. You know, when I was there for the Kavanaugh hearings, I was standing the whole time off to the side of the room, because he had the potential to be a Supreme Court now, justice. He is now. Um, I didn't feel the need to make anybody in that room who was going to decide his fate feel comfortable in my presence, and so I didn't.
Um, how has the concept of forgiveness entered this new life of being Jaime's voice?
So it depends on who we're talking about forgiving. If it's the person who did this, there isn't any, um, and there won't ever be. If we're talking about people who have maybe said things in the past that I feel are harmful to this mission or been wrong, and they want to find the right path now, I can very freely forgive, help, and work with, because we're all entitled to change. So it all depends on who the forgiveness is for. If it's for some legislators who not only have been wrong, but who use this issue in a way that I think incites violence against others, I have a really hard time forgiving that. There's, and I'll just use an example: the former occupant of the White House. He used language to incite violence. People died because of it. I have a hard time forgiving that.
Are you talking about January 6th?
Well, that and language before that. I mean, listen, every time he said things like, they're coming after your Second Amendment, okay, people would start sending me messages and threatening me with violence, okay, every time. We saw the way he encouraged violence in different scenarios. So listen, it was my hope that I could have worked with him to reduce gun violence in this country. I mean, I talk about it in the book. I did have some private meetings with the administration. They chose a different path.
I thought it was astounding on January 6th how the staff, the staff members of so many different legislators knew what to do because they had been through school trainings.
Listen, the staff members, many of them are young kids. Some of them high school students doing internships or college students doing internships. And that's exactly right. They're used now. It's a new phenomenon in America, but doing these safe shooter drills, and how shame on us as a country for
Absolutely.
getting to this place where that becomes normal. Um, you know, but January 6th opened up the eyes of a lot of legislators to what our children feel like now in school. And my hope, my optimism is that's going to play a role when they're asked to decide on certain things around public safety going forward.
Do you anticipate having Jaime's Law brought up for a vote in this Congress?
Oh, I'm counting on it. Yeah, in fact, having very active conversations on when that will come up for a hearing. But I am. I'm working very closely with Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's really spearheading it, and she believes completely in the value of this bill. Listen, it's such a simple bill. It seeks to do nothing more than extend background checks to ammunition. Here's why that matters. Because, like I said, you have 400 million weapons on the streets already, and many in the hands of someone who cannot pass a background check for a new weapon, but they're able to walk into any store right now and buy the bullets for that weapon they have illegally because nobody requires a background check on ammunition. If we extend background checks to ammunition, we'll save more lives immediately than we will by having them on firearms. And at the end of the day, this is about saving lives. And so I am hopeful that it'll get done.
Is there contemplation of any kind of national database for people who are flagged as, should not be able to purchase anything? Because right now it's state by state, correct?
Well, no, there actually is a national database. It's only as good as the information that gets put into it.
Uh,
A lot of states do a really bad job, and that's part of why there's efforts to fix the background check system and fix the national database and what's required to go into it. So we as a country can do better, and that's one of those things that we really do need to address, and sooner rather than later.
are any um, prominent like pro hunters or people who use guns safely, responsibly, are they supporting your mission?
No, listen, a lot. The majority of gun owners are supportive of gun safety measures. This has been the big fallacy that I think people have. The majority of gun owners are responsible and support gun safety. The leadership of the groups like the NRA take a different position because they've taken on the role of supporting the gun sellers. But their members, the majority of them, agree more with me on gun safety than they do with those who oppose all effort. And
But are they actively supporting, like helping you, campaigning with you, doing things with you? It,
no, listen, there are, and especially former military, who have used weapons that now get used on our streets, who really understand the power and destruction potential of these weapons. There are many former military, and I'd love to see more of them. Um, you know, Online and in writing, you'll see many hunters who talk about how they handle their weapons safely and how they have no issue with doing more. But the bulk of the voice for the other side really comes from the leadership of groups that don't necessarily represent their membership well.
Okay, that's interesting. Um, Many of the people listening to you now are your parents' ages. Can you talk about how they're doing?
You know, my mom and dad are unbelievable. They've lost a son, they've lost a granddaughter. My dad is 89, my mom is 84. Um, and they're strong people. They don't show you their pain, um, but they hurt every night. My mom cries all night. Um, that's reality, and they're they continue to kind of have my motto, which is we are determined to be okay because we want to have every day that we can with those that we love and are here on this earth. Um, they've lost a son and a granddaughter, but there are four other children and all of our spouses and all of our kids my parents still get to be around for. And so they go forward. Um, you know, it's the rabbi said at Jamie's funeral, and my parents embraced it. I've embraced it. We don't move on, we move
Forward.
forward.
We move
And
forward.
every day for my family, for me, it's a journey on this process of moving forward.
Okay. Would you ever consider running for office?
I get asked all the time, and that's definitely not in my future. Um, I, for those of you who do follow me, I like being unfiltered. I don't want to mute how I feel, what I want to say, who I want to say it to. And so I'm much better as what I would call an activist and somebody who pushes people to hold them accountable, um, because I don't want to have to, I don't want to be political. It's just, that's not what I want to do. I want to keep doing what I do, um, to hold people accountable and hopefully in a way that leads to bipartisan work again in this country. You
Absolutely.
know, I don't, I'm not trying to just push a party. I'm trying to push the way we do things to be different.
Yes. And you are so right about the change in administration. And I mean, what a confluence of events that Vice President Biden would reach out to you uh, to share what he has learned.
Yeah.
And it was so moving reading um, your description of your conversations where he just um, so sincere, so genuine, and spending quality time with you. Um, and
Hear my dog?
yes, yes, that's okay. It's not the first dog that's been on our lectures, so don't worry. Um, and and now he's president. So
Yeah.
I mean, what a stroke of luck for this cause. Um, and the name recognition that he has. He met you once, a while, months ago, and then you ran into him, or you were at another event, and he picked it up right where he left it. Can you elaborate on some of your
Yeah.
interactions and just?
He is a truly special person. Um, what people see of him as president is who he is as a human being, because I got to know him not as a vice president, not even as a candidate, but as a person who cared deeply about another person because of grief. And so here's the story. He reached out probably about 10 days after Jaime was killed, um, via phone. And he was traveling from Virginia to New York to go to an event for his son Beau Biden's foundation. As everyone knows, his son Beau died of cancer. And as everyone knows, Joe Biden knows extended grief. Um, and he just wanted to talk. He wanted to know how I was doing, how my wife was doing, how my son was doing. He wanted to know more about us. He wanted to know a lot more about Jaime. And he wanted to also talk to me about his family and to tell us what they've been through and how they've gotten through it. And over the course of the conversation, when he started talking to me about what my plans were at this moment in my head going forward, we talked about mission and purpose, which really became defining words for me. He then invited me 3 weeks later to an event that he was having in Florida for Beau Biden's foundation. And I brought another Parkland dad. There were about 300 people waiting to hear him speak at a house that we were in. And so when he finally motioned to his aide to bring us over, I just figured we were going to shake hands because he had hundreds of people waiting. But he brought us into a private room. He sat us down. And about 20 minutes later, I said to him, "You have like this house full of people waiting to hear you speak. Don't you need to go?" And he just said, "This is more important." That was it, you know? And he spent more time with us. What was amazing is he came prepared to talk to us about our families and our marriages, and very specifically wanted us to know that marriages, the 90 something percent of them fail after something like this. And he didn't want us to know that to scare us. He wanted us to be prepared. He wanted us to know why so that it didn't happen to us. And that's where he spoke to me about going through grief and about how no two people grieve the same way. And so be prepared to give each other the lanes to grieve differently, but to be able to support one another through the process. Um, Honestly, I'm so thankful that he did that, because I would have thought there was something wrong. Because I was going through this very public, I had this need to fight, right? My wife needed privacy. She needed peace. She needed quiet. We were going through it completely differently. Had Joe Biden not said to me, "You're going to go through this differently," I would have wondered what's wrong with us. And I'll never, ever forget him truly giving me the most valuable piece of information that I needed to hear going through this. Later on, I saw him again after the first Democratic Party presidential debate in Miami that I was there with, actually as a guest of Eric Swalwell. And at the end of the debate, I see him walking across the stage, and I look up on the stage in his direction, and he looks at me and he waves me over. I didn't even think he would know who I was. So I walk over there, and many people have seen the photo. He actually gets down on his knees and he grabs my hand, and he's just talking to me. Now, this is probably a year after we saw each other in our private meeting, but he picked up where we left off. He wants to know how my wife and son were doing. He wants to know, had I taken his advice on specific things that he brought up. I was shocked. This was actually the debate that he and Kamala Harris got into it in. And it was a very tense debate. You would think at the end of that debate, he would be maybe in a different mindset. It was like it never happened. He is an amazing human being. And I'm just thankful that he's our president. I'm thankful that he's given my family the support that he has. Thank you for asking about it.
Could you recap, please, the State of the Union episode? One of my favorite stories in the book.
Yeah. So, Speaker Pelosi had invited me to the State of the Union, and she also did the year before, to highlight her commitment to gun safety. The year before, I got really furious with the president at the time because of his comments on the Second Amendment and on all gun violence being from people crossing over the southern border and all that nonsense. And he started that again at this one. And early in the speech, he started about violence coming from over the southern border. And at the time, I wanted to scream out, the person who killed my daughter was a teenage American male, but I didn't. Later on in the speech, he started talking about the Second Amendment and saying how it's under attack all over this country, and he and only he will defend the Second Amendment. And I got angry, but I didn't jump up yet. It was when all of the Republican Party jumped up and started cheering out loud that I got to that I lost it. I let my emotion get the best of me, and I said 9 words. What about victims of gun violence like my daughter? And for that, I was removed, handcuffed, and arrested faster than anybody on January 6th. I mean, it was immediate.
And
And
I've watched the tape. I don't even know that anybody heard you except the people like right around you, because they were all, screaming and clapping down on the floor.
what was also crazy is 2 rows behind me. If you look at the photos, you'll see to my right, a row behind, Chef Jose Andres, an amazing humanitarian. And if you look at the photos of the video, he's pointing a row back. The reason is the row back, it was Don Trump Jr., Ronna McDaniel, and Don's Trump Jr.'s girlfriend. They were hooting and hollering the whole night. Nobody said a word. So I get removed, I get handcuffed, I get brought to a detention facility off their premises, and again, find the helpers. As soon as that speech ended, as soon as Speaker Pelosi got done tearing up her copy of it, the first thing she did is she found Congressman Ted Deutsch, and together they went and they called the Capitol Police. They demanded I get released. She sent the sergeant at arms and another staff member to come meet me at the facility and take me back to my hotel. While in the car being driven back, she called her assistant, so it came through the Bluetooth. I have to tell you, I was in a very bad place. I felt horrible. And I thought I embarrassed her. And so I started apologizing. And she just said to me, "What are you apologizing for?" She goes, "You spoke for America tonight. Don't you ever stop." And immediately helped me to feel better. It was a very hard, dark night, but I'm just so thankful for amazing people who have my back.
Speaking of that, can you read the paragraph on page 150?
Let me find page 150. But yeah, I can read anything. Just tell me which.
I was still very upset.
So yeah, I was still very upset when I went to sleep that night. I'd let my grief and emotions get the best of me. But I felt much better the next day when I saw how this nation was discussing gun safety because of what had happened, and even rallying to support what I did. One of the top trending hashtags on Twitter that day was "I stand with Fred." Perhaps this is what Speaker Pelosi meant when she spoke to me for my book. One of the most important things that I have said to our members or advocates is to believe, she told me. Believe. You have to believe that you can change minds. We have to believe when we're listening to you about the credibility and authenticity of your argument. It's no use to just be in the room. It has to be about belief. And yeah.
I thought that was really inspiring. She, I mean, you talk about how she's an amazing leader and strategist and always looking at the long view.
She is, listen, I could not be more thankful for what she has meant to me personally, what she has meant to this movement. You can debate me politically if you want, but what I think she has meant to this country, you know, she's just been decent. And 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 I again go back to the title of my book, Find the Helpers. It doesn't matter if they're your neighbor, if they're political, if they're media. Um, we all have our helpers. And what I have discovered is through every moment in my life, I've had helpers who were there, and we all do. Um, and I'm thankful that night that she was.
And I would imagine also that you being a helper to others is helping you heal as well.
It is. You know, for me this past year, I think the most meaning that I've gotten out of anything this past year actually is talking to families and groups dealing with loss from COVID. Um, you know, and it's actually a really important point because it has nothing to do with gun violence. Um, but grief is a unique thing that too many Americans are going through right now, and I've been able to connect with a lot of different groups to help them go forward, not move on, but go forward. Um, and I'm very thankful that I've been given this platform to help others be able to do that.
In the book, you talk about how the other Parkland families occasionally will get together
Yeah,
to help one another. Does that still continue?
it does. You know, some people have kind of moved or gone into different places, but we are all still connected and stay in touch. We don't all agree on everything for sure,
Sure.
but we share a bond and a characteristic that you can't ever remove from the equation. And um, we understand each other in ways that most people can't. You know, we've suffered a horrific, tragic loss, and we will always be there to support one another.
Okay. Um, were there any deniers of Parkland as there were for Sandy Hook?
Well, it's a good question. Um, there were none that got too um, much attention until recently, when Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments became very publicly known, where she was a denier of what happened in Parkland, as well as other things like Sandy Hook in Las Vegas and 9/11. And I started going after her for it. Um, and you know, she thankfully has had a consequence for the things she has said, the things she has lied about, and the harassment of people because of what happened in Parkland. Um, you know, so unfortunately, she's not the only one, but she certainly became the most high-profile person to become associated with denying this.
Um, the icon, the logo for Orange Ribbons for Jaime is that spectacular outline silhouette of her
Dancing,
dancing. I
yeah.
mean, it's just a stunning picture. I've seen other photos of you with the picture in the background. Um, tell me about that picture. And I mean, it's an extraordinary image that someone was able to capture.
Yeah. So at in her last year, I don't believe it was her last dance competition, but it was one of the competitions from that year. Somebody captured a photo of her doing a flying leap. And this particular photo was shared on the media and on social media in the days after her murder. And it became an iconic photo. And it's such a spectacular, beautiful photo of my daughter, that it has just maintained this iconic status. And what happened was, about 2 months after this all happened, um, an artist presented us with a painting of that photo. And so, yeah, I mean, actually, there another artist did the same in a different look with different colors. But those photos now, they're what I use in the logo for Orange Ribbons. I have a beautiful painting in my other office that is put up, and we have one in our house. But if there's one thing my daughter was known for when she danced, it was her ability to do these leaps and jumps with these beautifully straight legs. Um,
Yeah,
and
I mean, it's an amazing, um, she was stunning, and it's an amazing athleticism that's captured in that photo.
yeah.
Uh, Someone's asking if we can see the image. When I send out the follow-up email, would it be okay with you if I enclosed
Oh,
a
of
copy of that?
course.
Okay.
Of course.
Um, we only have a couple minutes left. I know we kind of booked you for an hour, but in the few minutes that we have left, is there anything that you would like to say to us? I've spoken to you about the people in Evanston, and this group, very educated, very up on all the issues, that high voting percentage here. Um, we have a lot of grandparents with a lot of
Yeah.
time on their hands, and who may be very interested in trying to move your issues forward. What would you like to say to us? Is there anything we can do?
Yeah. So two things. And being that it is such an active group, we as a country uh, put ourselves in a place where maybe what we wanted out of our leaders wasn't happening because too many of us stopped being involved. Too many of us stopped voting. Too many of us stopped going to town halls where political leaders were having meetings. Too many of us stopped holding people accountable. And so the first thing I want to say is, I tell this to the kids when I speak to them all the time, but I tell this to everybody. Your voice matters. Don't ever stop. And for those who are on this call now, you continue. At my mother is an example. She goes to every town hall. She goes and she holds legislators accountable all over the state of Ohio where she lives. Um, Use your voice. You tell people what you expect of them and what you want. It is a shame in America that when these town halls are held, you see a handful of people instead of hundreds. We need to change that. Um, the voting percentages in this country have been abysmal. It's why we are where we are today. This past election, we had tremendous turnout, but we can do better yet, and we need to. Um, and so that's my first thing that I would say. The other thing I want to say is more personal, and it's about helpers. Um, we all go through things in life, and we don't do anything without support from one another. Um, Always know who your people are. Always know who your helpers are. And if you're not sure, through the center that you're a part of or through a place of worship, reach out, so that you know who can be there for you. But also important is an obligation, because as important as it is to rely on helpers, whenever you are able to be a helper to someone else, do it. Nothing more than a phone call sometimes, just to make sure someone is okay. But be a helper, be there for somebody.
Um, that's a wonderful statement and great advice. And I can say with certainty that this group will take up the charge. Last year, I mentioned to you that we pivoted to virtual lectures from in person, and we had over 300 first-time donors last year at our as a result of our end of year fundraising, which is an extraordinary number. And we were just blown away by the generosity and gratitude that people have expressed really throughout the year. So we will take up the charge of paying it forward. Thank you so much. This was interesting and heartfelt and just really wonderful, like President Biden. You have that quality where it feels like we've known each other for longer than just an hour. But thank you very, very much for spending the time with us and answering our questions. We really appreciate it. I will
Thank you.
send you, there are lots of comments directed at you specifically, and I don't want to read them over, here now, but I will send them to you so
Thank
that
you so much.
So I wish you and your family all the best. Stay safe. Have you gotten your vaccine yet?
I've gotten both my shots. In fact, today is 2 weeks since my second one. So I'm very, very pleased about that. Yeah.
Great. You can go visit your mom and dad.
I'm planning to.
Great.
It's been a long time. So
Fred, thank you so much. I wish you all the best and much, much more continued political success with getting these bills through.
Thank you so much.
Will be a great tribute to your daughter.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
You too. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone, next week, Fruitland Jackson is back to give us a presentation on the emergence of the blues from the cotton fields to skyscrapers, and he will be playing music for us. It's going to be great. Please join us. I will see you next Tuesday. Thank you again to Avidor Evanston. Have a great week, everyone.